You do not want to buy a car that you can't enjoy because you can't afford to drive it. Hey everybody, welcome to the Build Young Grow Wealthy channel. My name is Walida Shree and I help millennials to control, protect, and grow their income to one day obtain financial freedom. In this video, I'm going to help give you some of my tips on how to buy a car, things you need to avoid so that you can buy the car that you love. So stay to the end for all the tips and all the tea. So I have me some notes today so that I can make sure I stay on track. First things first, I want to talk about setting a budget. So I know you guys probably hear me say this a lot, but having a budget is extremely important for your success. Because number one, if you don't know exactly how much you can afford to spend on your car, you will probably buy something that either you can't afford or you might buy something that you really didn't want and realize you could have afforded something better. So it's always best to look at your budget first to consult what you can and cannot buy. I bought me my first car that I actually paid for when I was 18 and it was about $7,000. Technically, you can say it was pretty much new because the person who I bought it from was very responsible. It was a 1999 Lexus ES300. It had about 70-ish thousand miles. Nobody really sat on the passenger side because she was single, and nobody sat in the back seats, period. So it's very well taken care of, and I actually felt like I got a steal for the car. At 18 years old, I paid cash for it, and I thought, everything was good. Now, what I didn't know was all the things that come with Lexus, like oil changes and maintenance and repairs and things like that. I did not calculate all of those things. So although I was able to pay cash for the car, when things started to break or when I needed to get new tires or get oil changes and things like that, those fees quickly added up. So it's really important to know how much your overall budget can afford. And I always say, like, you need to calculate those just in case expenditures because you just never know. So for instance, when I first bought the car, she did complain about the car skipping from 0 to 30, which is why she sold the car, because she had taken it to the mechanics a lot and they did not fix the problem. Come to find out, there was actually a recall on the car. And by the time I bought the car in 2007, I was 1 year past the point where they would have fixed the part for free. So it was actually the transmission that was having a recall, which was causing that skip to happen. So always be sure you also look up any recalls for the year, make, and model for your vehicle, because some things you may not have to pay for. But I did have to pay for that, and I ended up getting a warranty, which helped a lot. But it still was about $800 out of my pocket that had to be paid for that transmission to get replaced. So make sure you definitely have a budget for how much you want to spend for the overall car, but also like what is it going to take to maintain and keep that car. The second thing that I want to talk to you guys about, shopping online. So when it was time for me to sell that car, which I did eventually sell that car and buy another car, so I started to shop around. And I started to go to the shops or the car lots, but I realized that I didn't have time to keep doing all that. First of all, I live in the DFW Metroplex, and so the Metroplex is huge. So trying to drive around to all these different lots was just not feasible for me at the time because I just did not have the time to do that. So I learned that you can actually shop online. Basically, what you do is you go into either the actual dealership site, or you can go to sites like Carvana or Carfax and Kelly Blue Book. It's like a ton of online places you can go to look for your car. But I highly recommend doing those because when you do that, you can kind of get an idea of what you want without the pressure of somebody trying to sell you a car you don't want. Once you kind of narrow down the cars you really, really want and the location as to where you want to buy it, then I would say make a visit so that you can test the car out, check it to make sure it's exactly what it's been advertised, and then you can go from there. But I will warn you though, when you sign up on these sites, you're always going to have to exchange information for them to contact you. So when I started to do the online shopping, I was constantly bombarded with phone calls and emails and text messages on people trying to sell me cars. But like in person, you have to have a firm voice and just say no. Like I'm not trying to buy yet. I'm just shopping around. But I do want to tell you, if you do plan to buy a used car, make sure you check the mileage, because depending on how old the car is and how much it's been driven will determine on how fast you may have to start making repairs to the car. So even if the car is fairly young, if it has a lot of miles, you are still running the risk of having to replace parts that after a certain mileage will need to naturally be replaced. So just make sure you take that into consideration. And I think a good rule of thumb on how to determine if it's a good deal for the mileage and the price, 10 to 12,000 miles is about the average people drive per year. So if you buy a car and you say it's like 5 years old, you would just take 5 times 10, which is 50,000, or 5 times 12,000, and then that would be a good estimate as to what the mileage should be for that year car. The other thing is you want to see like a inspection quote. So if you buy through Carfax, they typically tell you like everything about that car, which I really highly recommend doing. Trust me when I tell you this, I highly recommend doing that. In addition to that, if you decide to buy from a third party, or if you decide to buy from somebody off of, I don't know, Craigslist, always take your car to an inspection outside of that person. So even if they present paperwork, you still want to do your due diligence, and you want to also do your homework by paying for somebody else to inspect the car. And I know it may seem like a bit much, but trust me when I tell you this, in the long run, you will be grateful that you invested that $50 to $100 to get that inspection done, because it will save you money in the long run if they did not disclose to you everything that's wrong with the car. I do want to say you have the option to buy new, used, or lease a car. Now, it really just depends on your budget, what you can afford, and what is good for you. I'm not going to be the person to tell you what not to do, but I will tell you, in the long run, buying a lease or getting a lease car is expensive. However, if it is in your budget, who am I to tell you not to do it? But if I were your parents and if it were me, I would say not to get a lease car, because when you think about the amount of money you're spending, you really could have just bought a used car cash, or you could have paid payments and paid off a brand new car. And the car would have been yours, and when you're tired of the car, you could sell it. You may not make as much money, but you're not getting any money back either whenever you lease cars. So just keep that in mind. Because I did have a friend who leased cars for years, and he paid about $800 per month because it was a Cadillac. He only got Cadillacs, and he's paying $800 a month, not included insurance, and gas. So I finally was like, these are some nice cars, but if you calculate how long you've been leasing cars times how much you've paid a month, you could have just bought a brand new Cadillac and kept it, saved some money over some years, and then sell the car whenever you want a new car. And he did that. He was really excited with that choice, because he did realize he was wasting a lot of money, because he worked from home. So it wasn't even a big deal to even have a car. So just keep that in mind. You want to calculate and see if you can afford it. And if you can afford it, if it's going to be good for your pockets overall. He definitely could afford the payment, but overall, it just wasn't a good investment for him when he broke down all the numbers. So just make sure you keep that in mind. So we talked about so far budgeting. We talked about shopping online to make sure you find a car exactly the kind of car you want, price range. Then we talked about doing an inspection, either through Carfax, or you can go take the car to a shop and actually have it be inspected. But whatever you do, do not buy a car that you do not have the history on. So try to get as much history as possible, because it will benefit you in the long run to know what you need to either get fixed, or so you don't have any surprises that you did not put into your budget. I do want to add one more thing. Just because you buy a car new doesn't mean that it is the best car. Make sure you look at the consumer reports for the different type of cars to make sure they have, good safety inspections, that there wasn't a lot of consumer complaints about a lot of things. Make sure you do due diligence on that as well, because all new cars are not created equal. So, for instance, my dad, he bought his Impala at the time brand new, and it seemed like that car was breaking down more than all of his used cars. So, and he took really good care of all his cars. So I don't to this day understand why, but when you start to look at the consumer reports and the complaints about what other consumers complain about, you can quickly realize that that year model was not the best year model for that particular make and model of the car. And I would recommend buying a warranty, so if things do break early, it's not coming out of your pocket. You want to also do an insurance quote. So before you actually get the car, you can kind of either go online or you can call and talk to an insurance agent about how much it will cost for that make and model of the car. And it also depends on where you live. So if you live in a place where there's always accidents, like where I live here in Dallas, then your car insurance is going to go up, even if you have a good driver's record. So, or if you do like, I think it's called Policy Genius, when you can see a ton of quotes, just see like if that's feasible for what you want to pay per month for your car insurance. If you buy a car used, you want to make sure that if you buy insurance, it's the appropriate amount of insurance. So for instance, maybe if you're trying to get full protection, find out if your car even qualifies that if you get into an accident that they'll even cover your car because of the year, make, and model. They do the calculations on that year, make, and model, and they may say that they're not going to pay for it. So just keep that in mind. Don't say you weren't warned. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is calculating all your initial fees. So even if you want to buy your car cash, you need to include all the initial fees. Because if you go in there with $20,000, but your fees with taxes and everything else comes out to be about $25,000, you're going to be about $5,000 short. So you want to make sure you calculate all the money you need up front, even if you do a one-time payment or if you do multiple payments. You want to make sure that you know exactly how much you're going to have to spend per month. How much is the down payment if you have to put a down payment down? How much is it going to be for your registrations and your license plate? Some places, like when I was in Indiana, you have to actually buy your license plate. But here in Texas, it comes with your registration, and then every year you have to pay for your registration sticker. You also need to include taxes, your title, because if you have to get a title, that's going to cost you for the processing and for you to have a copy and all that. Those are all things you want to include. And again, you definitely want to include your monthly fees like gas, how much is going to cost to get oil changes, how much is it going to cost for tires and all those things. So just have a good idea when I say your budget, really get familiar with how much is going to cost you for that car, because you do not want to buy a car that you can't enjoy because you can't afford to drive it. So I'm saying all this stuff to you because I wish I would have told myself these things had I had the knowledge back then when I first bought my first car before I went in and closed the deal. So those are basically all the things that I wanted to share with you guys. I do say have good negotiation skills. That is something you want to have. Don't just pay for what they tell you to pay. Always try to negotiate. That is something I do want to add. Be careful with some of these sites like Facebook Marketplace and things like that, because they may not always disclose everything wrong, and they may not allow you to take the car to get it inspected. So be careful buying cars from sites like those, because legally it'll be kind of hard to win a case with no paperwork. So make sure you have some form of paperwork, whether it's text messages or something where you can, if you had to take them to court for something, you can present that information to the judge and jury, and they can make that decision. But I hope you were able to take something away from this video. If you like content like this, please let me know below. Share this video with somebody who you know may be buying a car. One last thing though, December is probably your best time to buy cars because they're trying to get ready for the new year. And that is always a rule of thumb. So if you do ever try to buy a car, if your car isn't about to be on its last leg and you can postpone it until December, try to buy your cars in December, because that is the cheapest time to buy your cars from car dealerships, especially if you plan to buy your car brand new. So that is my last tip. Thank you for tuning in, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.